So, given that this threat no longer seems to be one with a very long, you know, time span, but has become much more urgent, take us through a range of some of the options beyond perhaps the most obvious ones. You know, sanctions, diplomacy, the possibility of preemption. Is there option 4, option 5? I mean, what range of possibilities do you see?
The president, when I'm with him nearly every day, rarely lets me escape the Oval Office without a question about North Korea. It is at the front of his mind. To your point, previous administrations for 20 years have whistled past the graveyard. Maybe that was okay. Maybe they weren't as close as they are today, so maybe that was an acceptable policy response. The president doesn't believe that it is today. So he has tasked us, the intelligence community, to try and deliver answers. Those answers will be delivered almost certainly alongside our partners at the Department of Defense, but deliver a range of options that can do what ultimately needs to be achieved. It would be a great thing to denuclearize the peninsula, to get those weapons off of that, but the thing that is most dangerous about it is the character who holds the control over them today. So from the administration's perspective, the most important thing we can do is separate those two, right? Separate capacity and someone who might well have intent, and break those two apart. And I am confident the intelligence community will present a wide range of options for the president about how we might go about that.
Well, let me press you on that because you mentioned the character of Kim Jong-un. I mean, you must have teams of people sort of looking at every piece of cheese he might eat, and I guess a lot of cheese. What kind of character is he? What can you tell us about him other than he's portly?
So the great public debate is about whether he is rational or not, right? We use this word from Western philosophy to try and describe someone who wouldn't know Western philosophy to hit him in the head. And we've watched, he'll respond. We've watched through many attempts. We've watched Kim Jong-un respond, right? He measures his responses. He's trying now to figure out how to work with the South Koreans to get us to back off, to get America to stop pressing just as hard as he is. You could certainly characterize that as a rational response to the threat that I think he perceives from the United States and from our allies. So in that sense, he certainly has the capability of responding to what is in his best interest and his regime's best interest. Look, there's times he does things that are completely unexplainable, and to us it may well look irrational. But I am convinced that in some space he understands his core mission, which is to keep himself in power.
Well, you seem to be hinting at something interesting there in your earlier answer when you said talking about separating the person from the capacity. And I think there are real questions as to whether you can ever get rid of capacity, since that's how North Korea stays in business. That's why it's relevant. So are you suggesting that then the alternative is some kind of regime change?
No, I think we can tackle every piece of that. So I think we can tackle capacity too. These weapon systems still need development. They need testing. They need people who are willing to work on these programs. To the extent we can convince China it's in its best interest to help us, convince Kim it's not in his best interest to move down that path, there are still many tools, right? It's a big, long supply chain to build this stuff out. So there are lots of ways that one might think to narrow the capacity band as well. Because frankly, it's one thing for him to have one missile capable of landing in Denver, Colorado, or even this beautiful place we find ourselves. It's another thing for him to have an entire arsenal, and there are things we can do to keep that capability out of his hands. And as for the regime, I'm hopeful we will find a way to separate that regime from this system.